Another day, another Souls-like. This time, Enotria, The Last Song. The game's so broken and unfinished that it's just impossible that this game got released in this state. And for a change, it's an Italian Souls-like. Very bright and sunny, so it's not grim and dark this time, and I can appreciate the change for once. It was announced not that long ago, with a cinematic trailer and everything looked cool and all, so when the demo got released, the reception was polarizing. The reception varied from "it's fine" to "what the hell." So when the full game got released, I decided to give it a go. And oh boy, I have seen things you have not seen. Things so broken that even I didn't see this level of trash in any other game. And I really wanted to like this game. And some aspects and ideas are actually kinda nice. But the game, it needed to stay in development for another year or maybe even longer than that. So let's start from positives, because there aren't many. So it's sunny and bright, colorful, Souls-like, and for a change, it doesn't really aim at putting you into depressed mood. The world idea is pretty neat. The lore is explained at the beginning of the game. It presents to us the world. So in this universe, music created men and men gave birth to gods, and the gods were flawed because men are flawed and the gods fell. So after the gods fell, men declared themselves a peak and discovered arts to shape the world. They drafted Canovacchio, a script that is putting the entire world into one giant big stage, and everyone in the world is trapped in this reality and they play a part in the play. It's stated to be a perfect world these who wrote this play have envisioned. We are the only one without a role, the maskless puppet, and we have to stop it. The lore and idea, the usage of Italian folklore is actually really good and makes you want to play and engage with the game, but I still think the game didn't go full on embracing and presenting the world to us. It's mostly just a setup on the beginning, some cutscenes when you battle the main big bosses, and some few conversations here and there with NPCs, no notes, no environmental storytelling, and even the NPCs, some of them have full voice acting, but other ones don't have any voice acting. And you have 3 maps to your disposition. First one being a town, second one being a shores and cliffs, the third one is kinda like a sunken town, kinda resembles, in my opinion, a Venice, and the first 2 maps are really nice to explore. I personally liked the second map more than the first one. It's very chill and relaxing, which, as I'm saying it kinda may not really resonate well with Souls fans. The third map feels really boring in its design, and when you traverse through it, you kinda feel how painfully repetitive it is. At some points, I entered a new alley and I thought I actually by mistake went back, but turns out it's just this. The place looks identical to the one that I visited like 5 minutes ago. The OST in this game is probably one of the better ones I've heard in the recent years in the video games. It didn't get boring, it doesn't get tedious, it's really like, it fits the game and it enriches the atmosphere. But however, there is a lot of problem with the game, and I would even dare to say that there's too much problems with the game. And if this game was released, let's say 2025, maybe it would be actually another triumph for a Souls-like genre. But right now, it is unfortunately not. Gameplay-wise, it has the chops that it needs to be a Souls-like game. But it also has way more than that. It has loadout system, upgrade tree, mask lines, basically skills. You can change the skills, shitloads of weapons, lots of them kinda useless because they kinda feel the same when you use them. Weapon upgrades, elementals, masks. And the game does a terrible job explaining what is what and how you should use these things to your advantage. But despite all of these things, combat is really clunky, and throughout the entire game, you just parry and hit. That's it. You may use mask lines to your advantage if you set them properly. Sometimes you will do some additional damage if you choose a good mask line to counter the elemental on the enemy, but you have to keep track of what mask line does what elemental, and at this point it's not really that big of a benefit to use them, to really go into it, read everything and keep track of it, so you just end up pairing, fighting the boss regularly most of the time. But I have to say, if you choose everything right, you will be able to maybe, with the help of like 2 or 3 mask lines that are to your disposition in the later part of the game, you will be able to end the boss fights in seconds. But if you are not buffed up yet, just parry, because the mask lines are kinda useless. Dodging makes no sense, and the enemy, when they execute the attack, for an example, executing jump attack, they fly towards you. If you dodge, they will turn and shift his trajectory mid-air, so they end up hitting you no matter where you roll. Dodge works only when you want to jump off the enemy backwards, and on projectiles. When enemy shoots projectiles at you occasionally, you can actually dodge and it does the job. After parrying for some time, you stagger the boss, and with the right weapon you will be able to take sometimes even more than 50% of their health. Yes, the game is clunky, repetitive, and extremely easy. The biggest boss fight in the entire game is visibility, because some bosses, like Zani, are way too big and you stand way too close to him, so you don't see half of the attacks he's making. But even without seeing what he's doing, you will be able to figure out what he's doing, because everything is timed and everything is played out the same. Or there's, for an example, a problem when the boss is going to push you into the wall and you can't move, so you just have your camera in front of your character. You don't see your character, you don't have a clear vision when you should parry, because you don't see how close the enemy's sword is to your body. But as with Zani, most of the time you're still going to be able to figure these things out. Some attacks will create clouds of dust and obstruct your vision. Most enemies are going to share the same attacks, by the way. Bosses have merely a couple of attacks, and some other bosses repeat the same moveset as you will encounter with the first boss. At some point, I just went into the fight and just started clicking parries mechanically on muscle memory. Why? Because nothing is changing. Combat gets repetitive, that you don't feel like you're playing against bosses or actual enemies. You just feel like everything is designed for you to click certain button at this moment, because the developer set it for you to click. The bosses or enemies don't innovate, then they don't move in natural way like enemies should. Maybe creators went on this game too far on this whole puppet and actor thing. Why? Because the enemies feel like puppets. They have certain role, they have certain moves and certain lines, and they don't do anything outside of this box. They are not going to surprise you in any way, which doesn't make for a fun game, but rather kinda miserable and boring experience. And last quarter of the game, I had more fun with the game when it actually broke, because it at least got me some laughs rather than actually playing the game itself. And when you can enter the boss fight and defeat the boss on a first go in a Souls-like game, and I repeat, me, who sucks at Souls games, something isn't right. And it's important to note that 60% of the game I didn't upgrade any mask lines, didn't bother changing masks, didn't bother changing skills, I didn't change any weapons, and still was using the same weapon that I got in the first city, just upgrading it. And I still found the game easy. So imagine if I used everything correctly from the beginning. If I didn't play Flintlock recently, I'd say this is the easiest Souls-like I've ever played. But it takes the second place because Flintlock was kind of a joke if it comes to difficulty. Sometimes I was even surprised because the mini-bosses or regular enemies gave me more of a hard time than full-blown bosses, the mainline bosses. One of these enemies was stationed right before the boat you have to take to reach the third location, and for some reason he would kill me in 2 hits and I couldn't really do anything. I kind of feel like at some points the game doesn't really register parries correctly, so I jumped around the arena a bit. And this is what has occurred. Yes, I may not be necessarily proud of it, but the game is so broken that you are able to get enemies to stuck and defeat them without problems. As long as you won't execute the finishing move, which usually takes up to 50% of their health with the right weapon, you will be able to defeat them and they will not move from the spot they are stuck in. I had enemies stuck multiple times. I caused them to stuck because I jumped around too much, or maybe even during a fight, the enemies just froze in place. Hell, remember this guy from the trailer? Yes, during the boss fight, he actually stuck, and if I didn't execute the finishing move, I could have just hit him continuously until he collapsed. One mini-boss just rolled into the wall and got stuck and wouldn't move. The last boss fight in the fucking game managed to freeze during a regular fight. I wasn't jumping around, I wasn't doing anything, he just froze, and I am not proud of it. But this is how I finished the game. Dude wouldn't move no matter what I did, and I couldn't stagger him until I beat him. So after you beat the boss, there is no way to reload the past save because the game doesn't allow you to save manually. You have only one save slot and it overrides automatically. So I cannot go back and beat it again without repeating this entire game. Additionally, the game's fight music got stuck on loop throughout the entire ending cutscene. But I'm not the only one who finished the game on a bug. There are two playthroughs on YouTube, one from Ruben and second one from Moist Critical, who finished the last boss because they had their backs towards the wall and the boss starts teleporting at one point, and the boss teleported outside of the arena and died.
Oh. He just got stuck outside the map. I was against the wall and he teleported. He got stuck outside. Oh my god.
This is impossible.
How the fuck do you release the game in such a broken state? I almost didn't finish the game, by the way, because the game locked me inside the wall when I tried rolling out of the moving elevator. And there is no manual saving, so the progress is saved as soon as you click return to main menu when you will try to reload the past save. So I spent 15 minutes trying to get out of this elevator log, and after testing everything I had in my inventory, I noticed that I couldn't kill myself to respawn at the dot, so I almost lost hope. But I read every item description. I found one that for some reason I still had in my inventory. The potion that is going to take you back to the last knot you visited, which knots in the game are bonfires. I forcefully closed the game to not repeat the same mistake so it wouldn't save the wasted resources, and when I loaded the game for the 7th time, it spawned me under the textures and finally killed me when I fell down below the map. I was ready to give up, and I managed to wrestle through it somehow. I found one way, but the game spawned me in the wrong place, which didn't happen one time, because when I forcefully shut down the game at one point spawned me on the boss arena and I couldn't leave, so I had to place myself being front to the arena but backwards to the curtain so it would trigger the animation of entering the arena. This happens notoriously in this game. Most players at the point when I got locked probably would shut down the fucking game and went to play something that is actually finished. Also, you can fight the enemies through the walls, and you will also get hit through these walls. It's not one-sided. That completely defeats the purpose of pillars in the boss fight arenas, because bosses having really long range will just kill you through them. Also, something that I have noticed when fighting the enemies, and especially some mini-bosses, there are problems with game actually counting you hitting enemy. When the enemy is in something that the game recognizes as the enemy dodging, and this dodging doesn't even have to look like dodge. For an example, the enemy can just do circles around you. It doesn't matter that you actually will end up hitting the enemy. The game doesn't count that. Your sword, your spear, your weapon just goes through the enemy and no damage is counted. Which the game isn't as generous when you are dodging and the enemy is going to catch you mid-dodge. you're just going to be hit. AI is borderline brain dead, and enemies will always move towards you in a straight line. Sometimes they are just end up running or jumping off the cliff. Archers and riflemen, after noticing you, will try to shoot you in a straight line, not moving by an inch. And even if you are 2 buildings away from them, they still try to shoot you through the entire building. Few times it happened when enemies started hitting the floor on the upper floor because I was below them and they haven't seen me yet. Cannons can shoot you at 75-80 degree angle, which looks comical. Enemies usually will get flabbergasted and will just stand and wait if you stand up on some object in the middle of the fight. One time it didn't happen, so he actually got to the tree that I stand on and we fell both off the cliff. But we didn't die and we just landed on a small shelf on the cliff. The enemy just stood waiting for nothing. There was no way to get out of there, so I ended up jumping down because there was no point of standing there. The game left my points on the shelf in the middle of the cliff, basically costing me 18k points. If you die, the game will also leave every elevator, doors, etc. opened in the place you left them. So that resulted in me losing 28k points because the elevator left downstairs and I wasn't able to see that there is no elevator in the dark room. The visibility was so awful. That elevator also counts as a game's visibility problem, as it wasn't the only time outside of the fights when I just died because I couldn't see shit. There is another one, shallow water, with crabs on it, right? But 2 steps to the right or 2 steps to the left, you will just drown. Where with this game's graphics, which are fucking awful by the way, it's kinda unnoticeable until you point the camera down to actually see the depth. So the game also introduces something like rifts, which you activate by stomping on the ground or just interacting with it, and it's going to create like a bridge, or maybe it's going to put a beam on your road so you can actually cross some hole in the ground. And to be completely honest, these kind of things are interesting, but those normal rifts are maybe used in the game, like I encountered it maybe 3-4 times. It's severely underused, and the only rifts that were actually present in the game were red rifts, meaning those are activated to trigger the encounter with some side boss or maybe some additional enemies. But outside of that, the normal type of rifts that would actually unlock some passage, they are just forgotten for the good part of the game. The game is also short. The creators said 40 hours, but the reality is, if you want to explore and fight additional bosses etc, it will maybe take you up to 15 hours. If you are only interested in running through the game, defeating only mainline bosses and seeing the ending, that's around 8 to 10 hours if you are good at Souls games, and if you suck at them, it will be around 12 hours. So either creators said 40 hours because they assumed that you suck at Souls games and you're going to repeat the fights over and over again, but even then it's not 40 hours. Or they said it with New Game Plus in mind, although I still think it wouldn't amount to 40 hours. There are 2 endings, by the way. 2 main endings, and the third one is a secret ending. There are 2 boss fights at the end, and one ending skips the last boss fight, and the other one, the standard ending, gets you additional boss fight at the end, which is really easy. The game, however, doesn't give you a clear choice, because if you're going to do what the game tells you to do, you will just skip the last boss fight and trigger so-called bad ending. You have to kinda improvise to trigger the additional ending. There is also the secret ending when you have to complete set of steps to get it, but I'm seeing a lot of reports from people who say that the ending just doesn't trigger despite of them completing every step that you have to complete to trigger it. It seems like the secret ending is bugged, but I haven't tried the secret ending myself. In fact, you can only get one ending per run, So I'm stuck on the so-called bad ending because I did what the game told me to do. And that's why it just skipped the additional boss fight for me and I wasn't able to repeat it. Sucks. Lastly, the graphics. Graphics in this game are fucking ugly. Let's not kid ourselves. When turning on the game, everything on my PC was set automatically to ultra settings. And this is the first thing that I saw, and my first reaction was, I quote, "What the fuck? The textures didn't load?" I had to lower the settings after leaving the first cave because the optimization is so awful. On RTX 3060, the game, no matter what settings, runs at more or less 50 frames. It doesn't hit stable 60. It also hates OBS for some reason, because no matter how low the settings, the game would always run at 40 to 40 frames if OBS was on at the time. It has frame drops on the first map, especially in the city. On the second map, it ran pretty well, despite of the fact that the second map is way larger and than the first one, it ran actually smooth. The third one is a shit show, complete stutterfest. Game would lose the frames, and in addition to it, it stutters when you are moving through the city forward. And everything in this game looks pretty rough. In conclusion, this game never should have been released in this state. It's an unfinished and broken product. You can get locked out of the finishing of the game. You cannot save manually. You can bug the bosses. Bosses will get stuck inside the fucking textures. They will just freeze mid-fight. They will teleport and die by themselves outside of the map. It's an insult to players who are asked to pay $50 for this game just to receive this unfinished, ugly, and broken product. That is all for me. Bye.
A most peculiar take.
Perhaps. The weight of existence, the expectations, the